Also, in partnership with the Department of Financial Assistance, Workforce Development will empower its clients to expand employee rights and protections. In consultation with the Labor Advisory Council, a tripartite committee consisting of workers, employers, and government representatives, the Ministry of Labor will introduce necessary amendments to the Employment Act 2000. Furthermore, the Wage Commission is expected to provide its second report on a living wage in the 2022 fiscal period. Consultation will commence with stakeholders on a statutory minimum wage with the aim of tabling a wage bill in Parliament. The Economic Development Department will continue to provide a wide range of services, education, and training to drive economic diversification and growth, and promote Bermuda as the optimal jurisdiction for businesses across various industries. The department has made tremendous progress in advancing initiatives with significant economic benefit to Bermuda. Some of these include medical tourism, vertical farming, and the establishment of the Fisheries Development Center. The Economic Development Department is also responsible for the Incentives for Job Makers program, which earned over $300,000 in revenue in 2021-22, and the Alien Land Licensing program, which made the government over $9 million in revenues in 2021-22. The Bermuda Economic Development Corporation will continue to provide support and services to entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized enterprises. The BEDC will prioritize numerous initiatives aimed to stimulate economic activity, including establishing the Uptown Development Authority. The authority will oversee the regeneration of Northeast Hamilton Economic Empowerment Zone by facilitating residential and mixed-use development projects. The Bermuda Business Development Agency will pursue targeted business development opportunities in key industries aligned with Bermuda's value proposition and anticipated future growth potential. These include risk and insurance solutions, high net worth services, asset management, technology, and infrastructure, for example, hotel development, subsea cables, space and satellites, renewable energy, and the blue economy. In terms of what lies ahead in 2022, the BDA will be hosting or attending the following major events: the inaugural Bermuda Risk Summit, Risk World in San Francisco, additional business development meetings in Silicon Valley focusing on technology, climate risk financing, and venture capital, Executive Forum in New York City, Bermuda Climate Summit, and the 4th Annual Bermuda Tech Summit being held in person as part of Bermuda Tech Week. As the ministry responsible for the Economic Recovery Plan, it is critical that we remain laser focused on the effective execution of priority initiatives. The ERP aims to combine fiscal responsibility with a clear path to growth, employment, and greater economic equity. The proposed policies in the ERP have been prioritized to focus on investment and implementation capacity in areas with the highest impact on Bermuda's medium-term economic growth and employment. Of the 31 initiatives identified as having the highest priority across government, the Ministry's 4 lead initiatives focus on a strategy of economic diversification, reducing socio-economic disparities, and leveraging our natural resources and geographic advantages. These lead initiatives include the following: rehabilitation of the Times Bay infrastructure, development of Uptown Northeast Hamilton, development of a casino industry, and development of vertical farming. A general overview of key highlights and status updates on Bermuda's Economic Recovery Plan implementation is available online at gov.bm. In closing, it is anticipated that by creating a synergistic relationship between economy and labor, we can make meaningful progress to dismantling the barriers that prevent Bermudians from fully participating in our economy and create opportunities that enable us to build a Bermuda that works for all. Thank you.
Good day, Bermuda. Today, I would like to share the Ministry of Education's 2022-23 budget highlights. The Ministry of Education provides an invaluable service to the people of Bermuda and our nearly 4,400 students. Being the only school system in Bermuda that is truly comprehensive, our work is essential and rewarding as it contributes to our country's growth and prosperity. In addition to the ongoing work to provide high-quality educational services to our students enrolled in the Bermuda public school system from pre to senior schools and at the Bermuda College, and the continuing work of the Bermuda Libraries and Archives, in the 2022-23 fiscal year, we will undertake the work needed to advance the reformation of our education system. This includes transforming our public schools, preparing for the implementation of the Education Authority, and putting much needed spotlight on the preservation of our educational history. The Ministry of Education has been allocated a budget of $135.25 million, presenting an increase of $7.2 million when compared to last year's budget. The bulk of this increase, some $4.4 million, is a result of the expiry of the 10% austerity measures agreed to by our union partners and the salary uplifts agreed to when all Bermuda Union of Teacher posts were regraded in 2019. The balance of just over $2.8 million consists of funds required to continue Bermuda's education reform and minor related operational costs. Despite this overall increase, we have taken seriously the need to review budgets across the board and can report that efficiencies resulting in budget reductions have been found in the Bermuda College Annual Grant, Cedar Bridge Academy's grant, the Department of Education, the Department of Libraries and Archives, grant allocations to private agencies, and operational expenses including travel, communications, and professional services. These reductions have been essential to ensure that education reform remains the priority of the Ministry of Education. In transforming our public schools, the upcoming fiscal year will see the implementation of new policies that ensure a public school system that achieves the vision we have for each and every learner, that is being an inclusive, equitable, and future-focused system for Bermuda. One of the significant highlights of the upcoming fiscal year includes the scheduled launching of the new signature learning programs at Cedar Bridge Academy and the Barclay Institute in September 2022. Cedar Bridge Academy will offer trades and professions along with science, technology, engineering, and math, otherwise known as STEM, while the Barclay Institute will offer health and social care along with financial and insurance services. These signature programs will make up 30% of the incoming S1 students' curriculum, with the other 70% being the existing core curriculum. During the past year, through the Learning First initiative, educators, leaders, young people and their parents, and the business and community partners have been working to develop improved approaches to learning, teaching, and schooling aligned with 21st century best practice. The work has been exciting and includes designing and testing with stakeholders the new features of a transformed public schools and developing and executing the system conditions required for their successful implementation. I am excited about what is in store for our students, especially our current M3 students, who are, as we speak, engaged in a process to help them choose their signature learning program and therefore the senior school that they will enter this coming September. We will also begin to conduct surveys of our existing school buildings in the next few weeks. These inspections are necessary to develop the phased and costed roadmap for our education reform agenda's building and construction program component. This roadmap is necessary to pave the way for the opening of some parish primary schools and additional signature schools scheduled for September 2023, and have a line of sight on the phased approach to opening transformed public schools in the years that follow. To be ready for the academic years that begin in September 2022 and September 2023, this year's budget allocates funding to support the training and professional learning necessary to enhance the competence and confidence of teachers, educational staff, school leaders, and the Department of Education staff. As we prepare for the eventual implementation of the Education Authority, the work of the Education Authority Working Group is ongoing. There is still much work to do, including hosting more meetings with our current school boards, as it is critical for their input into this initiative. Shortly, we will begin a search for an interim chairperson to join the team as we move towards the phased implementation of the education authority that will eventually lead our public school system. As we promised, we have established a History and Legacy Committee to engage with the community to document, commemorate, and preserve Bermuda's educational and school histories and legacies. We saw this promise begin to unfold last year in November when a short-term working group was appointed. The work of the History and Legacy Working Group is well underway, and I expect to see a report in early April, including recommendations on how to recognize, preserve, and put on display the long and proud history of education in Bermuda. A budget allocation of $107,000 has been set aside for the work of the History and Legacy Committee. As I stated in the beginning of my press conference, we will continue to provide high-quality educational services to our students from pre to senior school in the Bermuda public school system. Within the Department of Education, we are very confident that the efforts that are undertaken for education reform will achieve the following: improve student outcomes, increased student success, and enable all students to lead personally and professionally, contribute locally, and compete globally. While the Department of Education will continue to provide support for education reform, their day-to-day operations of running the public school system efficiently remains a priority. Efforts to continue the work necessary to bring about the changes in the way educators lead in schools and at the Department of Education, in the way that teachers teach, and most importantly, the way that children learn will remain the department's primary objectives. I'm happy to announce that we have retained the Bermuda government scholarships and awards funding at the same levels as previous years. The ministry has budgeted $1.4 million to administer the ministry's annual scholarships and awards program this upcoming fiscal year. Last year's total of just over 100 scholarships and awards should be matched again this year. The College Promise program that provides public high school students with the opportunity to attend the Bermuda College tuition-free will also continue. Roughly $250,000 has been set aside to fund the merit-based program for public school students with GPAs of 3.0 or higher. In September 2020 and September 2021, enrollment more than doubled as 67 and 60 public school students respectively registered and enjoyed the benefits of the College Promise program. During the 2022-23 fiscal year, the Ministry of Education will continue investing and supporting our citizens by providing the necessary funding to upskill themselves through the Bermuda College. The $300,000 financial aid grant to the Bermuda College, which has been in place since 2017 and has seen almost 200 students directly benefit and graduate from Bermuda College with a degree or certificate, will be continued. When glancing at the budget statement, it's easy to note the reduction of some $728,000 from the Bermuda College's annual grant. As I explained earlier in my statement, while we did receive an increase from last year's budget, virtually all of that increase was utilized for salaries and education reform, and reductions had to have been made across all of our departments. However, despite this reduction, Bermuda College is committed to continuing the excellent delivery of programs that have seen their enrollment go from 926 students in 2016 to 1,305 students in 2021. As an accredited institution with the New England Commission for Higher Education, Bermuda College is the most economical choice for Bermudians and residents seeking post-secondary education. Out of the many initiatives Bermuda College has ongoing, I'm most excited about the establishment of the National Educators Institute. This will provide a centralized entity for professional learning and conversations for Bermuda's public and private school educators, counselors, and mentors. Over this past year, more than 20 educational professionals from both public and private schools and the Bermuda College have been working to operationalize the 4 tiers of the NEI: pedagogy and practice, social, emotional, research, and the Summer Institute. One of the key outcomes of the work undertaken during this past year is the development of professional learning standards. The work within the National Educators Institute will continue this upcoming year and align with what is happening with education reform. Some of the exciting programs and offerings that can be had at the Bermuda College consist of the dual enrollment program with our public senior schools, the $300,000 financial aid grant, the annual Roche Science Week, certification courses in compliance with the International Compliance Association, coding certificates, working with the Bermuda Insurance Institute and developing a reinsurance advisory board comprising of industry leaders and representatives from St. John's University and Georgia State University. These, along with the infrastructure upgrades, including the eventual grand opening of the $3.8 million Athene Career Development Center, are some of the fantastic offers to be realized in this upcoming year. The Bermuda Libraries and Archives provide critical and timely services to the Bermuda public that will continue in the upcoming fiscal year. The National Library and the Bermuda Youth Library offer many programs for our families and users under 14. Popular programs found at the libraries include the STEM program, Tutor.com Homework Help, Storytime Saturday, Book Babies, Diallo Story, the Teen Advisory Board, the Girls Club, the Chess Club, Adult Storytime, the Seniors Annual Tea, and of course, free internet. While curbed by COVID, the library has had to adapt and still provide functions to the general public, which will be continuing in this upcoming year. The provision of archival and research assistance is another key job of the Bermuda National Library and Archives. During the past year, 8 years of the Royal Gazette has been digitized from January 1954 to December 1962. Funding will allow 4 more years of the Royal Gazette to be digitized this upcoming year, from January 1963 to December 1966. Records at the archives were invaluable in providing critical assistance to the Commission of Inquiry into the Historical Loss of Land research. Anyone who has visited the Bermuda National Library website and used it for research will find a wealth of knowledge, especially the archive section. So I conclude that today I've provided just a brief overview of what the next fiscal year will involve for the Ministry of Education. I encourage all to tune in on Monday, March 21st, when I will go into more depth about the total budget in the House of Assembly. Our efforts are critical to the success of our island home, and I look forward to a positive and purposeful 2022-2023 fiscal year. Thank you.
Minister Rabain and Minister. At this time, we welcome questions from the media, starting with ZBM.
Hi, good morning, ministers. Jasmine from Bermuda Broadcasting. So, Minister Hayward, you mentioned that the unemployment benefit is going to be extended to the end of August. Is there a plan in place for what is intended to happen once that time frame is passed?
So our aim is to transition as much people as we possibly can onto the financial assistance benefit rather than the supplemental unemployment benefit. And then we have to identify what are the barriers that are in the way for some persons on the supplemental unemployment benefit from enabling them to have a sustainable income, and working to reduce those barriers.
Okay. Is there a separate fund set aside for if that supplemental benefit needs to be extended?
So the supplemental unemployment benefit, the funding of it comes from the Ministry of Finance, while the grants that are paid underneath financial assistance is provided by the Department of Financial Assistance.
Okay, you mentioned also that a new senior social worker was appointed. Given that there's a hiring freeze, was this an internal promotion or was somebody hired from external?
Government hiring continues. Before any announcement of any hiring freeze, you would note that there have been regular ads in the newspaper in terms of government jobs. But that particular job is critical to us providing the wraparound service that some of our clients actually need. And so I'm pleased that to have that addition on board. And what that enables us to do is better position ourselves to service the clients that we have.
Sure. You also mentioned recently about the digitization of the immigration progress. Do we have an update on how that's going in terms of implementing the new system?
Certainly. I'll be making an announcement in the coming weeks in regards to us rolling out the first phase of that project in earnest. The aim is to have all application types be allowed to be submitted online and have an end-to-end digitized process where persons would also receive digital certificates from the Department of Immigration online.
Okay. Thanks. I'll switch over to Minister Diallo Rabain. You mentioned that the Legacy Committee will receive about $107,000 to set up that committee. Can I ask why such a high amount and what it will be used towards specifically?
It'll be used with what we're expecting from the working group that has been assembled is a report that will speak to, what can be done, and what we're anticipating is not just written, but also video recording, interviews that need to happen, archival research and the like. So the funding that we'll put towards that is what we anticipate would be not only the stipend that we would pay for these persons because they're doing quite a lot of work, but any sort of research that needs to go behind it and any funding that needed to, for example, if we needed to hire videographers or something along those lines.
Okay. And so they would this be internal hiring, do you mean, since there's a hiring freeze? Or?
No, it would, when I say hiring, meaning we would put out a bid for someone in the public. So that was the purpose of putting that fund there. It's a contingency fund. Perhaps we don't use it all, and then it can be redirected towards something along an education reform. But at this point, that was when we looked at what we could accomplish over the next year. That was an amount that we came up with.
Okay, thank you. Some parents have complained about the cost of food vouchers for students being increased. Do you know why that's happened?
The Department of Education doesn't issue food vouchers, so I honestly I couldn't answer that question.
Okay, thanks. Can you confirm whether Gcses will be a part of the signature schools starting September?
For clarity, as I mentioned, the signature program makes up 30% of the curriculum, and the S1 students incoming will continue with 70% of the curriculum that already exists. And the signature programs are only for the incoming S1s. So the remaining students will continue on the same track that we have, as we redevelop the curriculum from S2 all the way through S in the future will be to S5. It's all of those things are in consideration, retaining the Gcses and whether we'll retain other international exams as well. So those will be part of the moving forward.
Is there a possibility Gcses could be scrapped in that case?
Nothing's off the table.
All right. Is there a reason why it's being considered?
As I said, as we look to reform our school system, we actually look at what we call the graduation requirements, and those have to be realigned. And so those graduation requirements will always have some sort of international, they need to have an international equivalency tied to them. And so when we're talking about redeveloping the curriculum will be internationally certified. We'll be looking to have the curriculum internationally certified as well. And so those are the things that are still being discussed as we move forward. But I do know that the discussion around what the graduation requirements is one that's ongoing now, and they're pretty much finalized with that. And as soon as we do have those final things, we will be just making those announcements. But retaining the Gcses for the time being, they're not going anywhere for the time being.
Sure. And just touching on Bermuda College, you mentioned they'll be receiving less funds this fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
Are you hoping that the fundraising body, the Bermuda College Foundation, will be the primary source going forward?
The idea is for the Bermuda College to become more self-sustaining as we move forward. But however, in order for us to continue to provide services that we do provide, it is there always will be some for a government grant institution. When you look at public institutions worldwide, and we would just have an organization, tuition makes up, at Bermuda College, tuition makes up maybe 26% of the money they need to run. And so when tuition rates are that low and you need additional funding, just be there. But as I said, the Bermuda College represents a value for Bermudians to attend. The idea of able to go there, obtain up to your degree, 2 years of university fees elsewhere. It's even more pronounced when we talk about the dual enrollment program, where we have high school students who are graduating from college before they graduate from high school, and that's 2 years of college tuition that their parents don't have to pay. And so it is value for money, and we will continue to support it because of the wonderful things it does and gives our citizens an opportunity to upskill themselves at an economical cost.
Thank you, Ministers.
Good afternoon, Ministers.
Good
Sean
afternoon.
Connolly here from the Royal Gazette. If I could start with Mr. Hayward, you said the budget was 74 million. Is that up or down?
That's up 12% from the previous.
Okay, that was quite a lot. The extra funding, what's going on?
The bulk of the additional funding will be for the grant and labor ministries. To the EDA is approximately $3.4 million, and the grant Gcse is $2.2 million.
Okay, you've cut the we can cut the programs. You've emphasised four main programs in the P. This is what the EA suggested some time ago. I you were wrong initially, were you?
I don't understand the question.
They said that it should be cut down to 3 or 4 priorities, or it should be emphasised to have 3 or 4 priorities, which is what you're now doing. So they were right, weren't they, the OBA?
No, not necessarily. What we have 31 priorities. You would know when we began the exercise, we had 81 policy initiatives. That 81 policy initiatives was then broken down to 31 priority areas. Those 31 priority areas we continue to focus on. That will be the bulk of the responsibility of the Ministry of Economy and Labor's monitoring, ensuring that we are still moving forward with those initiatives. What KPMG identified was 4 lead initiatives that we can get a greater level of economic development out of. And as a result, we've identified those 4 lead initiatives that the Project Management Office will assist EDD with supporting the Ministry of Development to carry out.
Okay, well, it is emphasising 4 areas, which is what the OBA did state. How does that be a major contributor to the economy?
Number one, the as pertains to time and beyond the burning trash. It's an overall plan for a water treatment facility, well, and sewage plant that will create infrastructure, group level infrastructure will create additional jobs, and certainly put us on a more sustainable path in the country. That's why that is deemed to be important.
You haven't named the consultant who's being paid $170,000 a year for Tynes Bay. Can you say who it is?
I haven't named. I don't think
The
I've
consultant.
I don't think I've had it proposed to me. I don't have that information with me, but I don't think it's any secret. And once that information, I don't know who that individual is, so I went to get the name of that individual, but it's certainly not a secret.
Okay, when will the figures be placed?
We're still working to secure a location for I mean with the EDC to get a strategic plan as regards to that particular facility. And once we have all the information, I'll endeavor to come back to the public and share the full plan with the public.
Vertical farming, what kind of foodstuffs are going to be grown? Wouldn't it be better just to use land market?
I think vertical farming provides us with a year-round farming solution. The initial plan is to start these.
All right, most economists say that the predictions in the budget about inflation were wildly optimistic at 2%, even before the war in Ukraine. So it looks like it's going to go up a lot more than that over the next year. Have you budgeted to take that into account in any way? And with food, everything, partly due to the effects of the war. What measures are you going to what measures are you going to take to try and alleviate that on normal families?
And so the Minister of Home Affairs is ultimately responsible for the Cost of Living Committee, who is to provide recommendations to Cabinet as to how we proceed with addressing the cost of living. But I think there are some basic things we can do from an economy standpoint that we are working from the Ministry of Economy and Labor, and that is expanding the residential population through a sustainable growth model. Additional to that is if we do produce some more of the food items on island, what you will find is that we have a better ability to control cost on those items.
But those are all long-term things. I mean, it's not going to pay next month's electricity bill, is it? What measures are you going to bring in now with this massive surge in costs of living, the cost of living crisis?
And so what you would have found in this year's budget from an overall standpoint is the Premier discussed relief. And he would have discussed relief as it pertains to payroll taxes, vehicle license fees, and other relief across the economy in terms of fees to be paid. That relief is taken into consideration that there is inflationary pressures on the economy, and that we do live in a high cost of living society, and that persons do require additional level of support.
All right, finally, Mr. Hayward, what role will Bermuda have in imposing personal sanctions on people like Abramovich?
There's a foreign policy questions, and we don't speak to foreign policy.
Well, it will have an economic impact, though, I would imagine. Can you talk about the shipping register? Would his super yachts be deregistered at all?
I believe that will fall under transport, not the Ministry of Economy and Labor.
Yeah, the Transport Minister didn't seem to know yesterday. But anyway, thank you. If I could turn to the Minister of Education. You mentioned about the that was first floated in December 2020. Would you accept that you've been dragging your feet over this and you've left loads of parents in limbo, not knowing which schools are going to close and which ones are going to remain open?
I would disagree with that because the decisions were made and the report was issued. It can be found on the Ministry of Education's website, and those decisions were made very publicly on several occasions. So the decisions have been made and they were published in mid-2021.
And has funding been allocated for that initiative?
I did speak to the funding that has been allocated to education reform, and that includes the work that needs to be done this fiscal year. Okay,
you mentioned before that it'd be funded by something called creative funding. Is that still the case?
As I mentioned, we will be beginning in the next few weeks to do the inspections of schools, and part of that is to not only develop a plan on how we plan to move forward in the next 3 to 5 years, but also to developing funding models.
It sounds like you don't know yet how you're going to pay for it or how much it's going to cost.
I didn't say that.
So you do know how much it's going to cost?
I said that the work that's being done this year is to look at what the funding costs will be and how they will be funded.
All right. Could you explain what the idea of creative funding is, please?
Creative funding is, and that is the purpose of why we're bringing in the project manager to give us an idea of how we can go and fund some of the things that we want to do.
Creative management, you could be, some people could be in the same creative management, so it sounds like we just, would that be a fair summary?
It wouldn't be a fair summary, but I cannot stop you from believing what you want to believe.
Okay, finally, Summersfield School have, the board of the school have put out a message to parents, etc., about the COVID regulations in school. They're saying that they're far too conservative compared to other places. Parents are struggling to look after children who've been quarantined. They're sometimes contradictory, and they have requested a shorter quarantine period. Do you think those concerns are valid, and is the government looking at changing them at all?
We made changes to the quarantine policy 2 weeks ago, and I believe they are valid. And as you would know, quarantine policy falls under the direct remit of the commissioner of the chief medical officer, so I can't speak to the quarantine measures. We believe that they're sufficient for what we do, and that is to keep our schools safe and to keep them open.
You're in charge of schools. 2 weeks ago, they're complaining last night. So is this look at again in the next few weeks?
The quarantine policies that are currently in place are always reviewed and they can be reviewed in order, or they can change the on a basis, and the subject of the next COVID committee meeting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, members of the media. Ministers, thank you for attending. Everyone, have a great day.